If you miss a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to Watch Replays and click on the session that you want to view. Have you created your own event agenda and swap card? Visit the Agenda and Watch Replay tabs to add sessions that interest you to your own event. You can go back to My Event to revisit any bookmarked sessions, sponsors, and items. We want to make sure that you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors. You can interact with them by visiting the Booths and the Sponsor tab. You can also bookmark sponsors or add items to your event to view later. Sponsors have uploaded extra materials for attendees. Make sure to visit sponsors that interest you to chat with one of their team members or save documents for later. We have dedicated meeting slots set up for break times between sessions. Continue the discussion by requesting meetings from others in the SwapCard platform. Schedule a meeting with another attendee or a sponsor by visiting their page. The panelists and speakers will be addressing your questions live during the stream. During the stream, use the question tab to ask your questions early in the presentation. Go to the poll tab to answer polls that will be discussed during the live stream. If you need help navigating SwapCard, please reach out to our team by mentioning @Parks Associates in the chat box or by contacting one of our team members via our company page. Hello, we're excited to welcome you to Parks Associates' 8th Annual Connected Health Summit, being hosted virtually across 2021 with sessions featuring our esteemed analyst team sharing Parks Associates' latest consumer data and market insights. In its 8th year, Connected Health Summit is an executive conference focused on the impact of connected devices and IoT healthcare solutions on consumers at home. The past 18 months have had an unprecedented impact on healthcare worldwide. The COVID-19 outbreak and resulting public safety measures led to sharp decreases in in-person visits, the delay of many elective procedures, and dramatic changes in how healthcare is accessed by patients and delivered by providers. This year's event, Connected Health Summit, Consumer Engagement and Innovation, addresses opportunities for new solutions including smart home platforms, telehealth services, voice assistants, and wearables to empower consumers, caregivers, and providers with new insight into patient health. Providers must rise to meet the growing demand for services in independent living, chronic care management, remote access to care, and wellness and fitness. New business models, technologies, and solutions are providing a more consumer-centric experience. Telehealth and independent living solutions are extending healthcare and enabling healthcare delivery to a larger market with a specific impact to elderly, patients with chronic conditions, rural households, and caretakers. We look forward to sharing more of our research across the year and bringing you the industry leaders in the connected health industries. Thank you for joining us today for these sessions.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our last track of Connected Health Summit. This track looks at the investment space for digital health and health tech, as well as some of the innovations coming onto the market and what we can expect for the future. If you haven't met me before, I'm Kristen Hannock, a senior analyst here at Parks Associates. I lead our research in connected health, designing and authoring our research projects, moderating and presenting at our events, and regularly speaking with industry executives to help answer some of the biggest questions impacting the health space today. Before we get started, I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors Alarm.com, Essence, and Everise for helping to make this event possible, as well as our supporters, CEDIA, Connected Design, Dealerscope, SCTE, the Monitoring Association, Z-Wave Alliance, Broadband Communities Magazine, ESA, Health Tech Insider, and mHealth Times. If this is your first time joining us in 2021, welcome. If you were with us for our other events earlier this year, welcome back. In terms of the agenda for this day's track, in a few minutes I'll be presenting some interesting data from Parks Associates and Rock Health and how the investment space has changed in the past 18 months. Next, we'll be hearing from Tom Castles, president of Rock Health, on some of the specific trends they're seeing in this space. At 2:45, Amol Pengarkar, director of product management at Samsung Electronics, will be participating in an executive Q&A with Parks Associates' own VP of Research, Jennifer Kent. At 3:15, we'll be doing our interactive panel with Ajaz Arif of VMAD, Greg Baker of Bascom Ventures, Scott McMillian of EXO, Howard Rosen of Livewire, and Chuck Sabin of the Bluetooth SIG. Finally, we'll end our day at 4:15 with networking discussions in a private chat room. If you have any questions for our presenters or panelists, please remember to get them in early. There's a submission box to the right of your screen. Tech innovation and the role of investments. If you were able to join yesterday's track on business models, you may have heard some of the trends I shared in that presentation and some of the trends our participants spoke about. In general, we can really summarize them as such. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the healthcare market has radically changed. Telehealth in particular has grown exponentially, with many other areas also experiencing strong lifts. This change has struck all aspects of the market, from consumers and patients, to providers and care centers, to allied health services, employers, payers, and many other players as well. End users and key decision makers, regardless of who they are or where they sit in the market, are now much more familiar with digital health than they were pre-pandemic. The benefits are understood, as are deployment models. And with the changes in regulation and reimbursement that have been made and continue to be made, business models are now supporting digital health, connected health, and remote care. Telehealth is now being used by a majority of US broadband households, 64% as of Parks Associates' last survey. The increased use of telehealth by patients, by providers, has also led to an increased recognition of where it fails. Before COVID-19, telehealth was commonly only supported for a limited number of acute conditions where providers didn't need to see biometric data or to run tests. During COVID-19, the use cases for telehealth really drastically widened. It needed to support many different disease states. In order to solve this, we've seen a sharp increase in the rollout of remote patient monitoring programs such as Livongo and remote diagnostic solutions like TytoCare. We've also seen growth in what we call digital therapeutic programs, app-based medical interventions, and the growth of hospital at home, among many other areas. While startups in the healthcare space have historically focused on business-to-business solutions, we've also seen a notable increase in interest in direct-to-consumer models. COVID-19 has prompted consumers to start monitoring their health and take proactive action to resolve issues in a way that we've never seen before. The technology and solutions that were rolled out for COVID-19 mitigation, still useful during this new surge of the Delta variant, also have uses beyond the duration of the pandemic. And of course, with the 3G sunset occurring next year, many devices out in the field will need to be replaced. The 3G sunset will heavily impact the PERS market, CPAP machines, and many other product types. This has created an opportunity for alternative communications technologies, including 5G, LPWAN such as LoRaWAN, Bluetooth, and others. The enormous boom we've seen in adoption, use, familiarity, and overall interest has led to a corresponding boom in the investment space. According to data collected by Rock Health, we've seen investment dollars in digital health roughly double between 2019 and 2020, and this doubling looks to be on track for 2021 as well. We've also seen a large number of mega deals take place, with several funding rounds breaking the $500 million mark. These include Noom, a leader in clinically backed digital health behavior change, specifically aimed at health statuses such as weight management, hypertension, and diabetes, as well as Ro, a vertically integrated end-to-end digital care platform. Other top deals include Incitro, a company specializing in machine learning to help create new medicines, as well as Hinge Health, a digital clinic for patients with musculoskeletal issues. With investments heating up, so are exits to public markets, as well as mergers and acquisitions. Digital health companies are taking advantage of favorable market conditions to list themselves publicly, with 11 exits so far in the first half of 2021, and an additional 11 exits expected to close this year. As per Rock Health, each month in 2021 so far has seen an average of 22 acquisitions of digital health companies, compared to last year's monthly average of just 12. So certainly many companies are seeing a need to build up their own solutions internally and to make more compelling offers to their prospective clients. Even with the investment space so hot right now, companies and investors are seeking to answer some key questions. Questions around the role and potential of new advances in technology, around the impact of the new Delta wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, and around the impact of privacy and security regulations and the eventual return of HIPAA. And there are also questions around how this new market for digital health will look like once the pandemic ends. There has been a massive change in behavior among consumers and care providers. To what degree can we expect this to continue? Regulation and reimbursement drives much of the digital care market. What decisions will regulators make now that the data around virtual and remote care has come in? The answers to all of these questions have implications that have a big impact on the bottom line for investors and for companies, and implications for the final question listed here. What is the sustainability of these new business models? We're hoping to help answer at least a few of these questions here today. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Tom Castles, president of Rock Health, for his Visionary Insights presentation. Tom, feel free to take it from here.
Thanks so much, Kristen. I'm excited to be here. Thank you to Parks Associates for inviting us to take part in today's session. I'm going to walk through a short version of what is a lengthy presentation on what we saw in H1 2021 with respect to venture investment in the digital health space. Also going to put in a little bit of color from what we're seeing in Q3 as we prepare to put out our Q3 report. I guess if you kind of come away with nothing else, I figured I'd start with the end in mind. COVID-19 and the limitations and opportunities that it presented have been an accelerator to what already was a very active space with startups and early adopters in the provider and facility and even insurance marketplaces. And we're really starting to see an advancement of an integration of technology with a lot of new players coming to the game. To the integration of digital solutions into research, drug discovery, and patient care, that's just the new table stakes. And I think where opportunity really exists is not just how do we do today what we did in the past, except digitally and marginally more efficiently, but what are the things that we can use information from new digital sources of data to determine what are the things we should be doing in the future and what should we stop doing that we're doing in the present. And the last thing I'd mention is lots of ink spilled over the big tech players entering the market, big retail players entering the market. Even without those parties, power inside of healthcare is shifting amongst legacy players as well as these new folks. And I think to control your own identity, it's going to require a lot more focus on commercialization of consumer-oriented solutions. To follow up on what was already said, the cat's out of the bag with respect to expectations now with the telehealth, remote patient monitoring, et cetera, that's been front and center during the pandemic. And really, I think the statement at the bottom of the page says it best. We have to act early, incumbent organizations in particular, with investment in digital innovation to stay relevant and to fight for position in a little bit of a new world order. I'm going to take you through a handful of themes. This is just going to be a little bit of the rocket docket for H1, and then I'll be available for questions at the end. I'm going to run through some data pretty quickly, but really it's the trends that I think I want you to take away. So the first is just giving a snapshot of H1 2021. Well, the snapshot looks an awful lot like the entirety of 2020. So in H1 through June, we already surpassed the digital health funding in all of 2020. That acceleration in March continued apace. We are still seeing growth in Q3, and really we project that this year is going to be a blowout, not just for dollars invested, but I'll talk in a few slides about moves that are being made in the market to consolidate, to move into the public markets, etc. Not only has 2021 been a record breaker, it's been a busy one, and the average deal size that we're seeing increased sharply, as you can see on the bubbles on the bottom of this page. The number of deals that it's taken to beat last year's total, which was a record investment, is a little bit lower than last year, which makes sense given the larger deal sizes. And that's something that we're continuing to see in Q3. Where are those dollars going? So I have two slides here that I always, the first ones that I always look at. The top 6 funded value propositions. When we track our venture deal database, we organize around both value proposition and clinical indication. The folks who really knocked it out of the park this year, folks who are working in drug discovery, so research and development, on-demand healthcare services, which is a continuation from last year, and fitness and wellness. Still plenty of dollars in treatment of disease, consumer information tools, and non-clinical workflow, but it's really been a blast off time for R&D, and that comes across different clinical areas. So right now, I would say mental health is on the tip of everyone's tongue, especially with some of the mergers that have and acquisitions that have taken place just last week, with regards to Headspace Health as the largest one, but also K Health buying Trust. These are examples of both horizontal and vertical integration around mental health. And one thing that you're starting to see is that large enterprise buyers of these digital health solutions are saying, well, right now, I've got one solution for mental health, another for CV services, another for oncology, another from primary care. Where are the platforms that can actually offer care across these clinical indicia? And that's actually a trend that we're seeing, move in both directions that I mentioned. One, companies within a specific area like mental health vertically integrating, and other companies, Teladoc as an example, horizontally integrating across those clinical conditions. So this is where the dollars have been going. One of the things that I mentioned was the growth in the size of deals, and a big part of this is a trend we call blitz funding in the private market. So if you take a look at the data on this slide, average deal sizes across all series are continuing to grow, and the greatest jump is in Series D+. That tells you two things. One, that there are some very healthy term sheets being signed out there. It also tells you that folks in the Series C and Series D+ are nearing where we have internally through our research team a kind of public market index around readiness for privately VC-backed companies to move into the public markets. What we've seen is just a real boost in the number of people who mathematically fit into that index. And a large part of that is because of the private equity and hedge funds who have entered into the digital health investment environment. For example, the elephant in the room is Tiger Global, and their strategy has been to come in very fast, due diligence, large founder-friendly deals, and really moving quickly through their cycle. Here on the right-hand side, you see some of the 14 total digital health deals, just digital health deals, that Tiger was involved in H1 2021. And you can see that they have they've definitely moved the market with their approach, and that leads to two other factors that I want to talk about. The first is industry consolidation. So what we were talking about with respect to where funding went and what that means for vertical and horizontal integration. This data on digital health acquisition rates growing is evidence that there isn't much of a lag right now, that the acquisitions per month in 2021 compared to 2022 are looking very healthy, and I think that the most likely acquirers of digital health companies are other digital health companies. More of those acquisitions completed in H1 2021 than all of 2020. A lot of the dollars coming into those D+ rounds are being used to consolidate within the digital health space, and that's something that we're also starting to see the numbers creep up for tech companies acquiring digital health, traditional tech companies acquiring digital health companies as well. And I think what we would say is you're going to see more of that, as well as a continuing number of digital health to digital health acquisitions. The last theme I'll hit on is public market pace, and right now, if you look from 2011 to H1 of 2021, digital health hasn't had mass years of public market exits. In fact, we had those 2 years between 2016 and 2019 where we went through an entire drought. Right now, we are in H1 and now continuing into H2, seeing a significant number of public exits, driven in large part by completed SPAC mergers, as well as expected 2021 SPAC mergers that we believe are going to close. What this means is there are more and more companies that we expect to exit. Some of the names on the right, these slides were made a little while ago, so there's been action on some of them. But if you think about not just the SPAC phenomenon, but the likes of Doximity going straight to the IPO route, we are seeing a class of digital health companies coming into the market. And if you look at the performance of the 2020 and H1 2021, it wasn't a particularly warm welcome, with pretty steep drop off for a number of these companies when we believed as a public that we were moving past COVID and moving past mask mandates, etc. Now that Delta has changed that tune, we've seen more value kind of coming back onto the market caps of these companies, and some actually performing at a fairly healthy pace. I'll leave you where I started. The emergence of digital investment across both the public and private markets reflects a changing power dynamic in healthcare that we have no choice but to embrace. The total pool of dollars is not growing fast enough that pharmacy, pharma and device payers and providers are not going to face stiff questions about how do we compete with or partner with big tech, big box retail, startups. And I think one of the healthiest things that we're seeing right now is a real desire for the parties that you see on the right-hand side of the page looking to collaboration. And I think that is a mark of what we would see as a robust and mature company coming up through the startup window and into the public markets, really looking at who are their platform partners going to be, and how are their business models going to fit, not on simply a standalone basis, but within this new world order. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and see if there are any questions from the audience, if we have some time.
Sure. Thank you so much for your presentation, Tommy. Yeah, we do have a few questions in from the audience, and as a reminder to audience members, make sure to, we have, I think, about 15 minutes, so we should have time for some really good insights.
Excellent.
But yeah, so audience members, please remember, if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them. But I do have one question in, and it is looking kind of, I think we talked a little bit about some of the changes in regulations. So we're curious to know what kind of attention are investors playing towards these new regulations coming out and some of the proposed changes for 2022?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we saw was in the first half, there were some regulations that came out related specifically to remote patient monitoring codes, and there was a substantial bet that those codes would be expanded. Now, the codes that were maintained were already baked into investors' views. I think there is all of a sudden a lot more close reading of interim final rules, and a lot of attention is going to be paid to the physician fee schedule, as well as what is going to happen with the ongoing regulatory landscape for practicing across state lines, what states are and are not going to allow for multi-state privileges. I think those are two areas where investors are beginning to kind of geek out, so to speak, on regulations. I think the other big piece to watch is the work that's going on in the FDA at the Center for Digital Health, and really thinking through from a business model perspective. I'll use the example of folks like Pear, who are going the route of prescription digital therapeutics, versus other organizations that are moving in the same clinical areas, but are making decisions not to play in a way that they would be regulated by the FDA. Mm-hmm. I think that investors are asking serious questions about what's the right path to go down, and unfortunately, like many things in life, there's no one answer to that. So right now, business model to business model, we're having to really ask those questions, and I think it's turning into full employment for regulatory specialists.
So certainly an exciting time to be in the regulatory specialist field.
Absolutely.
But yes, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday during the business models panel. It seems like there has been this also growth of the direct-to-consumer market. I think also echoing some of the confusion you mentioned about how exactly everything is going to shake out. So certainly some interest in just skipping the regulators, the reimbursement side of things, and just targeting consumers directly.
Yeah, there's all kinds of activity. In fact, we saw a significant jump in the percentage of dollars going to direct to consumer business models. We also are seeing D2C and B2B organizations merging, and really, in some cases, I think the value there is, twofold. One, in the D2C model, to be successful, you have to nail two things. One is attracting a user base that sees a very clear value proposition for themselves as individuals. The second is retaining that user base. I think what you would find with enterprise purchasers, and I'll use large self-insured employers as an example, one of the pushback points that they'll make on some of the B2B digital health companies is that this is exactly where they fail, that they don't effectively engage a large enough proportion of their employees to justify the cost of implementation and the benefit. So I think some of the value in the M&A transactions that we're seeing is ostensibly the acqui-hiring of folks who are truly skilled at engaging the individual consumer, in this case, the employee, and really doing a great job of retaining them in a program that benefits them and in turn benefits the employer.
Yes, and that education piece is really very, very critical. So we have a new question in. They're asking, how do you think the increase in funding in digital health is going to impact pre-seed and seed funding? And are more people looking at seed investments now because of the success seen in later stage companies?
I can speak from my own experience. I think there is a very strong market for seed and early stage investment. Rock Health, through our venture fund, we only invest in early stage, occasionally in a Series A, and we're seeing an incredible amount of competition for the leads in rounds. I think that's an incredibly good thing for folks who have a really strong founding team, a very clear problem that they're solving, and really the ability to kind of create gravity around their organization for growth. What's a little bit unhealthy is there is substantial competition for pre-product, pre-revenue, in some cases pre-team digital health startups, and I'd like to see a little bit more maturity on the earliest side, but where you see that and where I'm excited to see investments being made are in funds like Define Ventures or Redesign Health, which in their own ways are excellent early stage partners in shaping business model before the first raise. And so I look at look at those organizations as a really healthy part of the investor market.
Okay. So we have another question in talking a bit about how we've seen some of the big tech companies really start honing in and looking at the health market. What do you think the impact of that will ultimately be on this space as well? Can we expect to see many more acquisitions, or are they going to likely to design and target some of their solutions and potentially drive smaller players out of the market?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because there is a lot of activity among the companies we call big tech, but their activity is asymmetric. So, if you're talking about Microsoft, they are really looking to work with the healthcare and health tech community to come into the space, largely through their Azure cloud platform. But they have made multiple acquisitions in the past. Nuance, one of the most recent, and there they are kind of identifying a specific problem around documentation and going after it. I think Google, you couldn't go on Twitter without somebody having an opinion about what was going on at Google Health. Frankly, my take is that it's a bit of a non-story. The thing with big tech building out healthcare solutions, and Google is an example of someone who's building internally and through collaboration with a handful of health systems like Mayo Clinic, Ascension Health. What they really need and where the gravity in their organization lies is around search. It's around their core capabilities. And when you centralized a lot of the health efforts within a vertical at Google Health, you really needed those folks to plug in. Actually, I think what's happening now is just that the health folks are plugging into those existing strengths, and so I certainly wouldn't count Google as down, and Cerner is a pretty big tech company as well, not quite as big as the biggest, but I would say we take a look at I'll call them the middle children, so of the tech world. When we think about who are most likely to do integrations or acquisitions with up and coming digital health solutions, I think that's where tech companies will see more acquisition. I think big tech is going to do what they do, and that is we're gonna organize around our strengths and try to have as much impact as we can. The one thing I would say that I do not believe startups or middle children tech companies can do is to have the kind of impact that Apple and Google had when they came together around contact tracing. And something that we haven't talked about is the impact globally that these businesses can have on the public health sector. And that's something I would keep an eye out for these massive solutions that really take advantage of the fact that, you know, between iOS and Android, that's a lot of the market, especially inside the US.
So yeah, certainly a lot of potential there to impact public health through these mobile ecosystems. I think we have time for one more question. I think we're gonna have to progress. So we have a question in that is curious about the telemental health field. So we've seen that there have been a number of solutions funded that are more or less app-based, the digital therapeutics. We're also seeing the growth of more and more teletherapy solutions as well. Where do the investors sort of fall in that? Do they see that these the digital therapeutic solutions are a more appealing market, or the ones with the human touch?
I kind of break it down into you know, the investors who are investing behind digital therapeutics are basically investing behind a biotech thesis, that these are going to be entirely new solutions. I think folks who are investing behind the, you know, we'll call it the online to offline community. For example, Brightline is a pediatric mental health company that we at Rock Health and many others have had the chance to invest in. That is more of a belief in the fact that virtual care is going to be a complement or potentially replace face-to-face care as the principal mode, but there will always be a need for face-to-face. And then there are the investors who are putting, you know, big bets behind automation. And I think what I see there is an investment thesis that says it's phenomenal that all of these companies all of a sudden have created a booming employment market for therapists, and you know, I think therapists are underpaid for their services, but now it's getting ridiculous, the competition for therapists. We do not create therapists quickly, and there is an investor class looking at automation solutions utilizing self-administered CBT therapies, therapies for certain phobias that take the physical presence of a therapist out of the equation. Those folks are betting that if we can't fix the market gap between supply and demand, where providers, psychiatrists, psychologists, other allied therapists are going to go is, how do I expand my team and expand it in the direction of these automated products? So I guess I see three different types of investors in the behavioral health space, and I would be lying if I said I had the crystal ball on which is going to come out on top.
Yes, certainly there is a lot of room in the market, with, I believe, half of all mental health disorders untreated.
It is an epidemic which has grown during the pandemic, and one of the things that is makes me most optimistic about digital behavioral health is that many of these companies are bringing down the barriers to entry for seeking care by having, instead of the choice being I'm either going to go to a therapist's office or not, having a stepwise, I can educate myself on some of the symptoms that I'm having. I can join a group chat on what I think might be part of my problem before I ever make the decision that I am going to seek therapy. I think anything that can bring down the stigma and the barriers to entry is going to address that epidemic that you talked about, which is just increasing latent demand for mental health services.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly very, very important in this time.
Yes.
Fortunately, I believe that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Tom, for taking the time out of your day and speaking with us on this subject. It was very insightful and very happy to have this conversation.
I appreciate the chance to join, and thanks again. Thanks to the audience for your questions.
Yes, and then next up, we will be going to our executive spotlight with Amol Pangarkar of Samsung Electronics.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kent, Head of Research at Parks Associates, and I'm so pleased to be moderating this executive spotlight with Amol Pangarkar, who's Director of Product Management at Samsung Electronics. And Amal's been working in digital health for more than 13 years, building remote patient monitoring products at Boston Scientific, and then later using wearables and mobile technology to help people live a healthier life through his product management and team over at Samsung. So Amal, please join me today. I'm so excited to talk to you. How are you?
Hi, Jennifer. Good to talk to you again.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for being here today. To start off, what I'd love to do is hear kind of from your perspective, if you could tell us a little bit more about how Samsung really fits into the wider connected health landscape and ecosystem.
Sure. So I think you all probably already know Samsung is a large corporation. We have multiple business divisions. One is the big semiconductor division. The other is Samsung mobile business unit, which I'm part of, which makes the mobile phones, the wearables, and the Galaxy earbuds. And then the third is the appliances division, which makes the TVs, the uh, washing machines, the dryers, and everything. So my role is primarily focused on the mobile business unit, but Samsung as a whole is definitely is a big player in the connected ecosystem. We build wearables which help people monitor their activities, which help them sort of, I would say, even monitor their heart conditions through our Samsung Health Monitor app. And at the same time, I would say we have significant presence in physicians' offices through our TVs, display units, and our tablets. So overall, I would say Samsung has a large footprint in the healthcare ecosystem, primarily through its devices, tablets, mobile phones, wearables, as well as the display units and the TVs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a large corporation. You really have a presence in all sorts of ways that providers, consumers, engage with their health and try and manage their health. If we were to start on the fitness sort of wellness side and talk about kind of those direct to consumer products that you're working on directly, whether it be the smartwatch or the phone and the health app on the phone, these products have been getting more and more capable every year, right? Adding new sensors, detecting new types of data, providing new feedback to customers. From your vantage point in the products that you manage, what do consumers really want these products to do? We can even focus on the smartwatch if you want, but what are they looking to do? Is it mainly wellness, fitness? Are they looking more for actual medical insight? What's your thoughts?
That's a great question. I mean, we talk to a lot of consumers, and what we see is they have very much, they have a lot of interest in using their wearables, mobile phone to lead a healthy life. I think there are some consumers who are very savvy and who understand the difference between what is wellness versus what is medical grade versus the other end of the spectrum where there are some users whom we talk with, and they say that if my watch is telling me something, it has to be true. So they don't distinguish between wellness, health, or medical grade data. So what we at Samsung want to do is provide consumers with tools and technologies that meets their needs at the price points that they want to manage their health condition. We want to make sure that our products across health, wellness, and medical grade follow the same rigorous quality standard that we would expect from a Samsung product, but at the same time, we would want to distinguish between what is truly a wellness data set versus a medical grade data set. And for our medical grade data set, we want to make sure that we follow the highest regulatory clearance standard required from FDA, from European regulatory agencies, to make sure that the data that we generate the data that we provide to users is of the highest quality. And just to give an example, currently we have a Samsung Health Monitor app on our Samsung Galaxy watches that is enabled for Samsung users. And what it can do is it can record an ECG and detect the presence of atrial fibrillation, one of the most common form of arrhythmia. And in the pandemic, we have seen multiple cases where people who have used our smartwatch and the health monitoring feature to detect atrial fibrillation and get life-saving treatment early on. So what we have seen, going back to Jennifer's original question, I think people are not truly looking at health and wellness and medical grade data in a two distinct silos, but pretty much they are looking at watch to help them manage their health conditions and stay active, stay connected, and that is what we will continue to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been watching Samsung add these health features, right? The ECG detection, blood pressure, even, and working towards that. Can you talk to us a little bit about maybe that product development, process and bringing those to the phone? And you have been working to get FDA clearance, right? There's different decisions you can make to go down different paths, and helping the consumer understand what these metrics mean and can they trust them and rely on them, I think is a really big point.
Yeah, so we will continue to work with the regulatory agencies as appropriate for the features that require regulatory clearance. And we already have clearance for our ECG app. And Jennifer, as you rightly mentioned, for all these technology companies moving into the highly regulated space of medical device development has been a challenge. And I think but I would say FDA has opened up some new pathways like software as medical device, which enables some of these technology companies to leverage quicker development cycle and quicker approval cycles compared to traditional medical devices. That does not mean that we have reduced the quality or changed anything. We still do extensive clinical trials. Like for our ECG product, we did a large scale clinical trial of about 500 participants to show that we can perform in a consumer setting as good as a medical grade product. And FDA demands some of these high performance criteria from these consumer devices, because if we are not going to provide good quality data, we are going to burden the healthcare system rather than help. What primarily our goal is to give people the tools to manage their health condition, but we don't want to burden the healthcare system. Like too many people getting false positive alarms, and they're going to rush to their doctor, and the healthcare system is going to get overwhelmed. And already pandemic is overwhelming healthcare already. So we don't want to do that. FDA mandates very high performance, and we will continue to build the highest quality product and put it to rigorous test in extensive clinical trials and the quality management systems required by FDA to make sure that we build the right product for the right audience.
Yeah, and actually, as you were talking there, we did have a question come in asking if the blood pressure data is clinical grade, and so you are addressing that there. And one of the themes that we've had going over the past day and a half in our sessions here has been about kind of earning trust,
Yes.
and that consumers can trust the data, but also providers.
Yeah.
So when you don't have necessarily regulated, and you haven't gone through the trials, will providers trust the data?
Yes.
If that gets to their desk.
Exactly, and that's a fantastic question. I mean, I'll just address the blood pressure thing. We are going to continue to work with the regulatory agencies in US to make sure that the product meets the US FDA standard, and we have clearance in certain other geographies. So moving on to the next part, like you rightly said, what we want to do is provide right medical quality data, because otherwise the doctors are not going to like it. The doctors are not going to trust that data. And that is where I would say that FDA clearance, FDA's requirement for high performance helps companies like Samsung build that trust with both parties, the consumers and the providers, to make sure that the data that is sent by Samsung meets the need and helps, I would say, physicians monitor their patients and I would say consumers more thoroughly and remotely.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, we've seen a lot of change in consumer behavior over the past 18 months in all sorts of ways. Being at home primarily, obviously, is a big one, and what that means to household patterns and how they work out, and if they go to a gym or not, and how they engage with their healthcare provider. When you look at the sort of health and wellness and fitness features of the products that you're working with, right? Have you guys seen much in a change in how consumers are using their devices? Different features or different times a day, or anything that speaks to kind of consumer engagement with these great health tools?
No, I think that's another great question. So I think the pandemic definitely has been a disruptor to a lot of, I would say, industries like travel and I would say some other like restaurants. But in terms of technology, what we have seen is there is a wide scale increase in adoption. So Samsung has different tools for people to stay healthy, like typically people used to have a wearable and the mobile phone. They used to monitor their activity, and they used to go to the gym and typically log their activity. What we have seen now is people want to have their gyms at home. People tend to work out more at their home. So what they want is a much more, I would say, seamless transition between wearables, mobile phone, and TVs. TVs are primarily being used to sort of create a gym-like experience where people feel that they are part of a community, they are exercising with coaches, they are part of some sort of a class. So that gives that social bonding, that gamification. And wearable continues to be the primary tool to monitor some of the activity metrics, like the intensity of activity, the heart rate, what exactly the target zones you are setting. And typically, mobile phone continues to be sort of one primary repository where people continue to look at their dashboards, what their past performance and history are. So I would say that across all device spectrums, people have continued to use those devices. The intensity of usage definitely has increased. And I would say in terms of TV, that's becoming sort of the new hub for being part of the community of for people to feel part of a community of I would say fitness enthusiasts. That is one big change we are seeing over time in the pandemic. And overall, as I said, the intensity continues to increase.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, when you think about Samsung in the home, you have a ton of connected products from appliances to entertainment to health to smart home, of course, and moving more of that sort of smart things capabilities into TVs, for instance. So maybe can you talk a little bit more about that integration between your different product sets in the home? And it sounds like the wearables to the TV is really a primary connection that consumers are looking more for. So how do you make that easy for your users of your tech to kind of engage across platforms?
So yeah, I mean, before I jump into sort of the product roadmap for Samsung, which rather than focusing on it, I'll say what exactly user needs we are seeing and how we think connected devices are going to sort of play, whether it's Samsung or some other players. I think some other players might choose a different strategy, but overall the themes will stay the same. I think what people are seeing is they are spending more time at home. In fact, the percentage of people staying at home has significantly increased in the pandemic, even when some of the social distancing norms are getting removed. So people want to work out at home. People want to have their own personal gyms. But people at the same time are looking at trends where people want to have a feeling of community. And that is where we see these connected devices from TV, wearables, and mobile phone will play a role. But there is other side to this equation. I mean, all of this is focusing primarily on activity and targeting some of those metrics. But a big equation of staying healthy is going to be food. And how do we sort of create some of these connected devices across your home in terms of managing what you eat, how you can stay healthy by eating well, and then how you can exercise and how to motivate you to do all of that. That is where I think the challenge is going to be for some of these consumer electronic companies to make sure that a user follows through on all aspects of staying healthy rather than just the activity piece.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I'd actually say that, you know, a couple of years ago, we probably were much more focused on the kind of diet nutrition apps and features that were coming up because it is obviously such a core element to people's overall wellness. And in the past year, all of the focus, of course, has gone into, you know, COVID and infectious disease and vaccination and tracking, right?
Exactly.
But that doesn't go away, right? There's still an absolutely need. And also nutrition and food is very, very difficult. I mean, these are long established personal cultural patterns of eating and household, you know, lifestyles. So you know, it's great to hear some more focus, right, on kind of that nutrition and food element.
And you bring up a very good point, Jennifer. I mean, solving a nutrition problem is extremely challenging, not only because, as you rightly said, a lot of it is cultural, what we eat, what kind of food we like, and how we consume it. But at the same time, how do we ensure that there is a frictionless experience for users to log that data? How to measure some of the food that they are eating and whether that's healthy for them. Some of the technologies that have been in place, like asking people to log food or taking photos, I mean, that has not, I would say, resulted in broad scale adoption because the friction is still there. I mean, eventually some other creative solutions will come, which hopefully will overcome this barrier and the adoption will increase. But at this point, that continues to be a challenge. How to solve the nutrition side? I would say we are much more better at solving the activity side.
Yeah, absolutely. A little easier to measure. And so overall, there's been more progress there. I want to remind the audience, if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them into the chat or the question tab for Amal. So I'd also love to focus on the fact that Samsung, of course, besides your big footprint in the home, does have a footprint in facilities, right?
Yes.
I know that you've worked on kind of remote patient monitoring type solutions. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunity to kind of close the gap or create bridges and connections between kind of the facility and the home or the consumer and the provider, and what you see as the biggest opportunities to play a role there?
Sure. I mean, I think care continuum is a phrase which has been sort of used in healthcare for a long time. Even in Boston Scientific, I remember that was sort of the more vision for remote patient management system. I would say that with companies like Samsung, which have presence in physicians' offices at, I would say, and in-home, are best positioned to take advantage of some of these trends in care continuum, and especially with some of these technologies becoming much more, I would say, accessible and affordable, and being able to put in wearable like form factors or some other convenient form factors, we see that care continuum is going to be something that is achievable in the near future. Samsung, I would say, is best positioned because we already have a big footprint in physicians' offices as well as consumers. But I think there are some policy challenges. I mean, as we sort of open up some of the data sharing capabilities and some of the reimbursement mechanisms, and those are all things that are already under play, and we are seeing a lot of changes in some of the reimbursement structure. Health interoperability is also a big issue right now, but overall I would say that all these are changes which are going to happen at some point in time, and once those changes fall into place, we see a significant sort of ecosystem that can Samsung or players like Samsung can utilize through their footprint in physician's office and at in home. So that is where I see the future would be.
Yeah, and as that data kind of flows and those connections are made, and interoperability, becomes more and more reality, that also unlocks opportunities around AI and machine learning and some automation. We actually have a question from the audience here related to digital twin. So is Samsung pursuing any work, or if you can't talk about this specifically, generally your thoughts around full person digital twin technology and solutions that include maybe the many devices being produced to be able to kind of have that digital twin view of a person and their health and wellness?
So, I mean, I'll just say that digital twin is an interesting concept. But I think before commenting on whether Samsung has a plan on it, I personally think that that is something that's into the future. And we have, at least I haven't spent enough time to sort of come up with a firm opinion or ideas. Overall, Samsung roadmap is something I will not be able to talk more about on that one.
Sure, not a problem. Well, so let's talk about instead just generally your vision of kind of the next innovative steps that are coming down the path. So certainly, like you mentioned, better realization of that actual care continuum, in the next 1 to 2 years or 3 to 4 years, where do you think we go?
Sure. So I think if you see, I mean, at the end, I mean, Samsung and companies like Samsung typically have one single vision, is to make sure that the society as a whole is healthy, people's diseases are detected early, and if we can prevent people getting the disease, that would be the best. So I would say that there are different areas in terms of screening, diagnosis, and monitoring that companies like Samsung are going to look at. And we continue to look at possibilities where we can sort of help consumers the most. And typically, I would say that we are going to see regulatory barriers for therapeutic decisions which are significantly higher, but screening and some of the monitoring pieces are already in place, where we can utilize some of the current technologies to sort of build screening tools and monitoring tools to help people either go to the physician's office early enough so that their condition doesn't deteriorate further, or the second piece is going to be the monitoring piece, where we are able to monitor people's health conditions remotely and help them manage that condition better. In fact, Samsung has a fantastic program with Kaiser Permanente, where we have built a virtual cardiac rehab. So people who undergo a big cardiac event like heart attack or stent, who are implanted with stents, typically have to undergo a 6 to 8 weeks cardiac rehab program, where they have to go to a physician's office and perform exercises for an hour or so, and then follow some medication adherence programs. What we have seen is, if we can virtualize these programs, the completion rates significantly improve and the patient outcomes also significantly improve. Typically, cardiac rehab sees a percentage completions of about 40 to 50%. With a virtual cardiac rehab, the improvements are about 80% people complete. and the readmission rates dropped from 15% to 2%. So not only people have better outcomes, even the physicians have less burden, and the healthcare system as a whole has less burden because fewer people are getting readmitted for the same procedures or follow-up treatments. So what we see is these trends will continue to accelerate in terms of monitoring and screening in the short term, where people are much more comfortable managing their health conditions remotely once they have been seen by a physician. That will continue to evolve and become better and better in all disease areas, cardiovascular, mental health, and even oncology. But I would say that in much like 4 to 5 year horizon, we see that more AI tools typically which are focused on using existing data set like your activity, how fast you walk, what exactly is your balance, and how all those things are going to place. All that data points together with some of your vitals will help us sort of diagnose people even before they have disease symptoms or feel that they need to visit the office. So I would say preventive screening will become much more common in the future, where people who are not even aware that they could have a disease are alerted and they are followed up early on.
Well, wonderful. I appreciate that sort of look into the future. It's very exciting to see these things come down the pipe. We are at just about time. So, Amal, I want to thank you so much for your insights today and for joining us and telling us what Samsung's up to.
Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, thank you. And up next, we'll be back with our panel discussion with industry experts from across the board to really focus on innovations and investments in the future of connected health.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks everyone for joining us for this panel discussion on health tech funding driving the future of healthcare. We've got a great lineup of panelists here today, including Aijaz Arif, CEO and Chairman of VMed, Greg Baker, Managing Partner at Bascom Ventures, Scott McMillian, CEO of EXO, Howard Rosen, founder of LifeWire, and Chuck Sabin, the Senior Director at the Bluetooth SIG. Aijaz, can you maybe start us off and do a round of introductions and tell us a little bit about yourself and about VMed?
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer, for having me and giving me this opportunity to share my ideas through this platform. So at VMed, we offer a comprehensive virtual care as a service solution. We call it VCaaS for large healthcare systems, community hospitals, critical access hospital through our wide range of products and physician services. VMed's product line covers the entire care continuum through its telehealth products for inpatient acute care settings, for 24/7 on-demand visits for patients at hospitals, outpatient and ambulatory products for scheduled online visits, and remote patient monitoring product to cater patients at home. VMed also provides specialty physician services with its product line to make it a complete turnkey solution for healthcare systems. VMed's products and services are in use at almost 100 hospitals across the nation, Last year, after pandemic, VMed rolled out one of the largest telehealth implementations that industry has ever seen, and a very large healthcare system to address the challenges posed by COVID-19. So this is our introduction. Thank you. Krishna, I think you are on mute.
There we go. Sorry, a little bit of a technical issue back here at the studio. But Greg, I think we're going to be very happy to hear about you and what you do at Bascom Ventures.
Actually, I think the first part may have been the best introduction I've ever gotten. Hi, I'm Greg Baker. I'm managing partner of Bascom Ventures, which is part of Alumni Ventures, one of the most active venture capital funds in the country. All of our investors are individuals, and we have a family of 19 different venture capital funds, but we work in concert with each other to make the appropriate investment into a specific company. We strive to put together a diverse portfolio across industry and stage. So see a lot of connected health and other things that touch health, but also invest across a number of other areas. Looking forward to a great discussion here.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you with us here today, Greg, and definitely looking forward to that discussion as well. Before we jump to the next person, Ajaz, I think there's a slight issue with your camera right now. Could you please refresh? And then we're also happy to hear from Scott McMillan, who is the CEO of EXO. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at EXO? Also what EXO does as well?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kristen. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Scott McMillan, CEO and co-founder of EXO. EXO is a health tech company where our team is dedicated at advancing physical and cognitive performance across the spectrum of health and aging. We enable whole person health assessment, incorporating what we'll be launching as a next gen virtual care patch for critical vital signs and other biometrics. That'll be launched next year to enable virtual consultations and home diagnostics. And we've also developed an easier way to measure mobility, balance, and cognitive motor ability for aging assessments. Our third component is using cognitive digital testing, and that's what rounds out our whole patient care assessment. And we focus on this for the real-time virtual care consultations, remote patient monitoring for acute and chronic conditions, and then also for measuring frailty in seniors. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Scott. We're very happy to have you here with us today. Howard Rosen, founder of LifeWire Corporation. Howard, tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and what you do at LifeWire.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to this discussion. The quick story behind my background is by education, have an MBA. Naturally, with that background, I spent 20 years producing film and television, which is a natural segue into health IT. Now, there is a bit of a story in there, but again, we're trying to go through this quickly. So what LifeWire is, or what I invented, is a cloud-based communication platform that allows patients and providers to have an ongoing dialogue as if they're sitting in front of each other, but without on an automated remote basis. And key to that is part of my background, of course, into the engagement side, is reducing the barriers. So patients could choose whatever device that they want. So it could be a cell phone, tablet, computer, or landline. They choose how to communicate: text, email, interactive voice, chat, instant messaging. We tie into 400 wearables and medical devices. And this all happens instantly. There's no software. There's no special device. It's truly using the cloud, empowering whatever is native on their device. And we tie into data. We provide data for our clients for their AI and predictive modeling engines.
Yeah, something that's very highly critical when it comes to having AI actually work properly.
Exactly.
Yes, and then finally we have Chuck Savin, who is the Senior Director of Market Development at the Bluetooth STIG. Chuck, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work there. Chuck, I think your microphone might be muted. Maybe you can try refreshing. Seems our system's saying that you're not muted. Technical issues. So as we work to resolve some of this, we'll just jump ahead to our panel discussion, and then when Chuck is back on, we can go ahead and introduce him as well. But yes, we're very happy to have everyone here with us today. I'm very much looking forward to this panel discussion on some of the changes we've seen over the past 18 months or so in the health tech space, in terms of what we're seeing with investments and what we're seeing in terms of some of the innovative changes coming onto the market. So my first question to everyone, and feel free, everyone, to just chime in, really, if something matches your interest or if you have an answer to respond. So the last 18 months, we've seen this very dramatic increase in health funding with COVID-19 and some of the resulting changes in terms of regulation, reimbursement, and just awareness and willingness to use solutions, really creating this absolutely enormous tailwind. So what are you seeing in terms of some of the funding trends and what investors are looking for? And this could be kind of in results at like what you're seeing in the market as a whole, what you're seeing in terms of funding interest for your company and specifically. And anyone, just feel free to hop in on this. Though, Greg, I think this probably fits you. Oh, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of tailwinds, and some of the companies in the space are doing very, very well. But there's there's a lot of money looking for opportunities, which are creating some very interesting valuations. And having been a former startup CEO and now sitting on the other side, it's a good time to remind people that if you take too high of a valuation on an interim round, you're going to have to do really, really well to keep the momentum. And you're maybe much better off taking a slightly lower valuation just to continue the up and to the right trajectory. The bigger return for these entrepreneurs is a situation where you continue to grow, even if some of those steps are a little lower and have a slightly dilution. You end up at the end of the day much better off than if you have a backward step in there. High frothy markets like this can create situations where the valuation just isn't sustainable in 18 months when you go back for your next round. So be very cognizant of that as you're looking to raise this round in a market like this.
So certainly some great tailwinds, but maybe not tailwinds that we can expect to see next year or the year after.
Yeah.
Yeah, they come and go.
They come and go.
You're certainly seeing, you're certainly seeing euphoria of sorts, for lack of a better term, because of those tailwinds. But you're also seeing going, but is it really sustainable? What was really driving it? Partly, a pent-up demand that patients had to begin with, and a pent-up demand of providers wanted to try it but couldn't try it for whatever reason. And I think now that everyone's sort of tried it, we've had this unintended amazing trial test of it all, and now we're getting a lot of people going, what next? You've done this, what next? What's going to create those massive multiples that we kind of saw this past year? So it's a lot of questions, and to your point, Greg, we as entrepreneurs have to come up with credible answers as we're testing new ground as others. Mm-hmm. Aside from the fact that we all know our solution is the best solution.
Definitely. And I would also like to shed some light on M&As. The last year or this year actually, we saw, I was keeping an eye on these M&A deals. So there were 8 major M&As. And And if you look at the revenue multiples, since we are at this topic, on virtual healthcare side, you see that there were, out of 8, there were 4 deals that were in virtual healthcare. And almost all of them, except one, had the 13x revenue multiple, whereas one, which had pretty high, 21x when Amwell acquired Conversa. But in general, virtual healthcare is actually generating some good revenue multiples. And, from investor community point of view, I believe that they are definitely looking at these M&As from a strategic point of view. And this, the biggest one, M&A was Livongo and Teladoc. That has, a very huge impact on the industry, in my opinion, because what they are doing is they're combining RPM with telehealth, basically. And we at VMed believe that, we believe in this marriage, and we are working on developing something very similar. So, from investor community point of view, I believe that the typical telehealth solution, and I'm not looking at, virtual healthcare right now, especially telemedicine industry. If you have a solution that is typical AV solution with some integrations on the back end with EHR and PACS for ambulatory use case, I don't think it's going to cut. I don't think you're going to be able to go too far in terms of raising too much money. You have to be more innovative, and marrying RPM solution, or delivering solution for entire care continuum. I think these are the few things that I think are gonna be good for as an entrepreneur. I can advise other entrepreneurs that you have to be more innovative. The fervor in investment community is there, like last year, but they have gotten smarter. They have more data points to work with now. So yes, we are seeing a lot of investment going into digital healthcare sector. And as Tom was explaining, already in first half of this year, we have seen 14.7 billion already invested, which is already more than what was invested in last year. But it's still, now investors are looking for more innovation and uniqueness.
Yeah, and I think that is really what's exciting now. We seem to be going into the next phase of where a lot of the platforms have got a solid foothold. Their money has recently gone into really scaling those out, and what I think it's done for companies like ours that are pre-revenue is reduced a lot of the risk for the seed investors, as far as, is there a market for what we're doing? Is there, the business proof and the business models and established channels? And now we can start to see some really exciting innovations come to market. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yes, definitely. It looks like we've sorted out the issues with Chuck's microphone. So Chuck, if you can hear us, now's a good time to do your introduction.
Yeah, no, I hope you can. Can you hear me now? Is that working fine? Yeah, I apologize for that. So again, my name is Chuck Sabin. I'm the Senior Director for the Market Development at the Bluetooth Special Interest Group. And effectively, the Bluetooth Special Interest Group we are the organization that's behind the heart of the technology, Bluetooth, that's used in many of the devices and many of the solutions that we'll actually talk about here in connected health. And we manage the specification process, we manage the qualification and the tools associated with getting products to market, as well as the promotion of the Bluetooth brand. And we have over 35,000 plus member companies that are utilizing the technology in a number of different solutions and products that are delivered into the market, and that runs to the tune of about 4.5 billion Bluetooth enabled devices making it into the market on an annual basis, leading to about 6.5 billion per year by 2025. And a lot of this happens because of the solutions and the solutions orientation of the technology itself. Everything from what you know, probably know most about with regards to Bluetooth, which is audio streaming, all the way to Bluetooth being used in IoT devices for data transfer, being used for location services, asset tracking, asset management, indoor positioning technologies with location services, as well as device networks for lighting control and sensor networks and management of other types of networks that you might have, and automation and control networks that you might have in an industrial or in a hospital and so on. And even though a lot of these solutions, they provide unique value for developers, a lot of these solutions ultimately make it into the products and solutions that we'll be talking about today in terms of IoT healthcare solutions. And we're going to talk about healthcare solutions as we've started here, but the main reason I bring up these solution areas is that a lot of these solutions ultimately end up finding their way into products and into solutions that are being used for things like telehealth and wearables and connected health tracking and asset management and so on within the health services. And so it's a growing area for the technology and ultimately becomes one of those go-to technologies for enabling many of the solutions that are necessary in the next series of connected health solutions.
Certainly a lot of interesting things coming onto the market, and I believe I mentioned earlier some of what's been going on with the 3G sunset, maybe creating some new opportunities for different types of communications protocols. But yeah, happy that the audio is now working.
Thanks.
So everyone's here. But yeah, so what I guess would your kind of impression be of what's going on in this market, Jack? We've seen this big increase in maybe funding and this big increase in interest in all these sorts of solutions. Are there any solutions in particular you're seeing kind of pick up in terms of interest among Bluetooth Sync members?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, and ultimately I think it's one where what we are actually seeing is technology being used in a variety of different solutions for connected health. You almost, in terms of smart technology going into many of these solutions, have a tendency to think of it, and some of our members have a tendency to think about connected health solutions in terms of where patients are, as an example, within the treatment, like before treatment, during treatment, and after treatment. There has a tendency for various smart technologies to be engaged in those different engagement points with with an individual that might be seeking sort of safe treatment solutions. When we think about before treatment, there's a lot of focus, and there were some earlier speakers on the rise in telehealth and diagnosis and the use of wearables and medical wearables in order to do diagnoses and so on in a telehealth way versus actually coming in to the hospital or to the clinic. And so there's a lot of business that has actually continued to grow and actually has seen an acceleration in growth because of the need for telehealth related services for patients and for people. And during treatment, there's a whole host of solutions that are going into things like safe triage and real-time monitoring. Part of the spread of COVID, as an example, is around exposure. And so trying to limit exposure through various health monitoring solutions that allow for real-time data but provide less contact, so to speak, with the individual has been a big solution area that's been developed into into these clinics and hospitals and so on. And that's, when you think about it, the patient, it even then moves into areas around the facility itself, where you're looking at quarantining and geofencing and access control to certain areas through digital key areas. These are all sort of the areas around facility management that have continued to crop up in these sort of safe treatment type solutions. And then, of course, after treatment, there's a whole host of capabilities that are necessary for remote patient care for follow-up. Again, back to telehealth and the use of wearables and remote monitoring and sensing devices. We have seen just a significant number of companies that have started to utilize technology to assist in delivering these types of solutions in a before treatment, during treatment, and after treatment scenario in the market. And it's quite remarkable how COVID as a driver has really accelerated the need for these types of things.
Yes, it's we've had certainly a number of very promising technologies that have been out there for a while, or at least the foundations were out for a while. And then COVID just sort of led to an explosion of their adoption and use, and all of these new implementation types as well. But I think what we've seen as a whole is that the market for many different types of solutions has really radically evolved during this pandemic. We've seen a number of new business models as well really come to the forefront, and all these evolutions in technology. So I'm curious to hear some of your, and I believe you mentioned, each of you mentioned a few of these, your thoughts on some of these new business models in new areas. So for example, remote patient monitoring and some of the home health solutions are very promising. And Chuck, you talked about a number of the Bluetooth technologies. There's also all of these new emphases on patient engagement, user engagement, and different population health approaches as well.
Yeah, so what we have seen is a number of companies actually taking a solution area that they may have been focused on. Let's say it's location services as an example. And what we've seen a number of companies doing is actually pivoting their business model around solutions necessary for medical facilities and or for safe return solutions. So, when you're talking about things like managing social distancing, managing contact tracing, quarantining and monitoring, or even hygiene compliance, right? Because it's all part of the requirements and the needs for, one, potentially returning to a business, but two, just the general management of what it means to basically manage your business inside of a pandemic, essentially. So what we've seen is that there are various location technologies as an example, and you then take a company that then has been focused on, let's say, inventory management, but now looks at and says, wait a second, the technology itself, the solution itself, it can actually be pivoted into managing the requirements for better health management within a healthcare facility. And so we've seen a lot of businesses. It's not just a springing forward of new businesses, as we were talking about earlier. It's actually just taking an existing business and pivoting it around the needs of a particular market, and demonstrating how the technologies can be used to satisfy the needs of that particular industry or that particular market.
Mm-hmm.
We've certainly seen a evolution in terms of the business model, sort of matching the business with your provider. So, for example, where where we're not telehealth, which is event-based, for the most part, we're population management. So it's ongoing management of the population and monitoring. So the traditional model has been, per member per month. But because we sort of use it as a bit of a pre-triage to determine some of the telehealth solutions to deliver a patient, we're seeing more and more, for lack of a better term, pressure to really suss out value-based models. And more, a lot of look at the value-based side of things. Mm-hmm. Lots of issues with it, but we're getting more and more interest and sort of going, that's the route we want to go from the client side.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, Kristen, I would like to mention here is that I believe that yes, COVID did create some new evolving trends in healthcare, but it was, largely the same set of trends that we were anticipating before COVID-19. What actually COVID did, for the most part, was that it mainly accelerated the adoption of many of those trends. And you mentioned RPM, and we keep coming back to RPM. RPM is a big play, especially with the positive changes on the reimbursement model. which is here to stay, I believe. So RPM is going to play a big role. It has, an annual CAGR of 19.6%. So this area is going to grow tremendously and would solve a lot of issues for healthcare. Now, combining remote visits with remote monitoring is going to result in something that is very much required, especially when you see value migration from hospital to home. So we are a firm believer of this marriage, and as I mentioned earlier, we're already working on developing a solution for that. And so we are really targeting this 30 million ACO patient population and 70 million chronic disease patients in the U.S. The idea here is that there should be a single touch point for providers to see and monitor patients across the care continuum. And if you look at Teladoc Livongo deal, I think it is about this whole concept as well. And as I mentioned earlier, it would have a big impact on the market in general. I also believe that with the rise of aging population, mandates to keep readmission rates low, and positive changes in reimbursement models, you will see a huge drive for having innovative RPM telehealth solution with integrated Bluetooth devices and peripherals incorporated with AI and machine learning to serve the chronic patient population at home, that basically comprises of CHF, COPD, diabetes, and post-acute care patients.
Yeah, so certainly a great deal of potential in all of these relatively chronic conditions that still comprise much of the expenses in the healthcare space. Greg, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. So there was last year this enormous tie-up, the merger between Teladoc and Livongo. What are some of the funders thinking about these types of all-in-one solutions?
Generally, markets tend to go in that direction where you see consolidation around nice solutions. And certainly the timing of acquisitions in a market like this is really nice for investors. We like that. But I think that that's like a number of other industries that have been around and cycles that you see all the time. You have innovative companies create solutions, and then you end up with the larger players that have, whether it be distribution or whatever established, consolidate those into a more robust, larger solution. And it's just starting to play out a little bit in some of these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the business models have finally aligned, that we're starting to see some of this, what we call more natural market activity in other markets, but in healthcare with all of the many restrictions and barriers, it's finally where we would expect things to be.
One of the going around the discussion that we've had there, we're talking a lot about some trends of that COVID has created, and there's a little bit of me that wonders, looking 3-5 years out. I remember 3 to 5 years back, the guy down the street would not yell across the street the one time he sees me a month and tell me about when his family was getting their vaccines. They would never tell me about their health. Now everybody talks about it. Does that cycle back and people become less willing to be monitored? And how do we address that as an industry if we follow this as a long-term trend when it could be a short-term trend?
Yeah, so certainly some questions around the longevity of the changes that we've seen and to what degree they're going to be permanent.
But the solid business models are good.
Yes, definitely.
The aging helps this industry quite a bit. To get rid of the people like my mother who don't have the internet, or Bluetooth or anything like that in their house. So.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting points that were raised earlier that we've seen a lot of deals that are for more late stage funding rounds, some of the larger companies. I'm also curious to hear what's going on maybe in the startup space, what's really important for startups to understand. And Scott, maybe you could talk a little bit about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's been interesting hearing some of your other speakers and the other sessions, and I think it's consistent with what we're seeing is because of all this momentum in the later stage funding with whether it's IPOs, mergers, or big series raises, that it is creating demand at the early seed or pre-seed and seed stages that people want to get on deals. And I think Greg even mentioned that's leading to a lot of high valuations before revenue or product has been proven. So there's obviously some warning signals going off with that. So I think for, it at the seed stage, it's unless you're really tight with kind of the venture firm circles, it's always knocking on doors, talking to different angel groups and high net worth people. And in the health space, you typically need more capital than you would in a straight SaaS model type company at the seed stage before you can prove out what they want to see before a Series A. So all those challenges still exist. We also do hardware and a lot of edge computing. So, there's added capital and I guess what people with capital comes the risk with that. But again, there's also can be, as those companies succeed, a greater reward because of that barrier to entry. So, I think we're most excited to see that there will be more money at the seed stage where real innovation happens and can get into these business models that have a foothold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly an exciting time for lots of different companies with lots of different solutions. And Chuck, I think I mentioned earlier a little bit about the 3G sunset. We know, for example, that some of the networks are going to be shutting down early next year. I believe Verizon's is going to be shut down kind of later next year. But there are a lot of maybe devices out in the field that are going to suddenly stop working, and some players in the space are aware of that, and others really they don't pay so much attention. How are different companies kind of keeping an eye on this, and what sort of communications technologies are they choosing?
Well, that's a great question, but I think that the sunsetting of those types of networks, honestly, it doesn't impact the deployment or the delivery of a device that's utilizing Bluetooth technology, which I think is probably an important aspect around this. Is that ultimately this is a standard that has 20 years under its belt that will continue to work towards the interoperability of devices, for the long term. And what we're seeing in terms of connected health and connected health systems is that primarily Bluetooth's role is within the delivery of data from the device back to a system. So it's really one of turning information into data that can be used for analysis on a back end system. And a lot of that's about personal connectivity between a wearable and a back end system, or something along that line. So what we see is the integration of multiple technologies being used in many of these solutions. Bluetooth being one of them, Wi-Fi being another, and some form of wide area network being the other. But they're being utilized independently, but they're being used for specific solutions where Bluetooth might be used more for the sensors and the sensor systems and the delivery of data that's collected back to a back end system. If that's the direction you were going with the question.
Yeah, I think so. I've also been hearing about some of the LoRaWAN networks coming online, which are one of those wide area networks. Some of them do have pretty great coverage. Have you been hearing any rumbles about companies looking to use those sorts of networks instead of, or maybe a cellular connection?
Yeah, definitely. And the way that we look at Bluetooth technology is it's a complementary technology to whichever back-end delivery you want to use. If you want to take, you want to collect data through a sensor network and transfer it over Wi-Fi or transfer it over, some type of a 5G connection or LoRa or some other back-end transport. It really depends on the use case. It depends on the type of network complexity that they have, and kind of what they are looking to ultimately achieve. I think that you really should be looking at technology from the perspective of what do I need to achieve? What's the use case that I have, and how can I be best and most efficient in delivering that? And that may say, Wi-Fi, an embedded Wi-Fi network is the best way to collect data and transfer it amongst my systems. You may need a LoRa network to do that. You may need a 5G network to do that. But ultimately, it really does come down to the use case and the complementary nature that these technologies ultimately are being utilized in. I don't think it's a one versus the other. With regards to technology, I think it's more of a how can all of the technologies work together in order to deliver the solution that's required, because it is not it's not a one size fits all for any of these technologies, and so we do see a complementary nature of all of the delivery around this.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, certainly, especially as so many companies are international in their operations, it's important to have that mix of technologies.
Yes.
So I think we've talked a lot about technology products. Something else that I'm interested in learning are really what role are physician services maybe playing in the inpatient acute care side of virtual care, and how are investors looking at the services space? And Ashaz, I think that you might have a pretty interesting perspective here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kristen. So I personally firmly believe that physician services are going to play a critical role in the success of virtual care. One big problem that you solve out of many through virtual care is physician shortage. Healthcare systems, community hospitals, critical access hospitals in rural and urban areas alike are always looking for a specialist physician. They need physicians sometimes to cover gaps, and many a time they want telephysicians to cover and run their ICUs and stroke programs end to end. So now I'm not sure how much you guys know about boots on the ground physicians. That is the prevalent way of providing services, but it does not solve all of your physician shortage related issues. So that is where telehealth solution comes in, where it provides a mechanism for physicians to connect with patients at a hospital or ICU, for example, on-demand basis, 24/7, where a specialist physician becomes available within a matter of few minutes. So that's the beauty of telemedicine. Now, for this to happen, you have to have an effective telehealth solution that has call scheduling, routing mechanism, messaging, all necessary integrations available. With that, you can place physicians in a sort of cloud mode. It's something very similar to what cloud technology did to IT infrastructure 15 years ago or so. So you can put physician time slots in cloud that hospitals can avail through smart call routing and modeling function. This is what we do here. So we are running ICUs and stroke centers end to end remotely. This not only solves physician shortage issue, but for hospitals, there is a significant cost saving as well. For example, I give you an example. If there is a 10-bed ICU, it would cost a hospital around $2 million a year if they were to hire boots on the ground physicians. Whereas we can do it at 1/3 of that cost. So that's how effective it is. And I also believe that now this big healthcare systems, they are looking for a bundle solution where they can get technology products, telemedicine products, plus physician services. So, and we are finding that if you have physician services combined, the churn rate is low, and you have a better chance to be in that account and provide better services over there. And investors like that. Investors like turn rates to be better. So physician services, in my opinion, help us a lot, solve a lot of problems, and plus, it makes your solution as a telemedicine company more valuable.
Yeah, certainly with that, with the Delta outbreak hitting everywhere, there's been a massive overload of work on physicians and on nurses and really throughout the health field. So anything that can help solve some of this pressure is definitely welcome. So something else I think that is of note is this, we've seen this increasing emphasis on privacy and data protection by regulators really worldwide. For example, GDPR in the EU, the California Data Privacy Act, and in the US we have HIPAA, of course, which has been waived for certain digital virtual health solutions for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, that remains ongoing, but at some point in time, it is going to end. So how are our decision makers really approaching these areas? And Howard, I think I'm interested in hearing your opinion on this.
Well, it's going to be interesting because obviously there's the relaxation of the rules for the past 15 months now, and a lot of solutions have come on board. But we're already hearing from, again, from clients, prospective clients, they're getting worried about using. There was always a worry about these solutions in any regard in terms of how much was relaxed and how much was done. But once they reduce the relaxation, what's going to happen to the solutions that they've integrated? And I know a lot of organizations are sort of backfilling to try to deal with those whole areas of the security and privacy. But to your point, it goes back to what are the new rules going to be? Certainly we have HIPAA, but GDPR, what standards are people going to go for? In our case, we kind of, even before COVID, we sort of said, okay, well, the best thing to do is what is the highest standards we can go for? And so in our particular case, all throughout COVID, we were actually going through our high trust audit for security and privacy for the work that we do, which we've got certified. But what we have found with clients, that discussion about what are the rules going to be, can you satisfy rules after the case, whatever it's going to become, that got answered by saying, okay, we're high trust certified, right? We satisfy those levels of security and privacy, and sort of took that discussion off the table. But we are hearing continuing more and more about what is going to happen, and the concern as to the solutions that they use, are they going to satisfy those rules, and what are those rules going to be? So it's just large question marks that are sort of left out there.
Yeah, it certainly is an area that we all need to, stay on top of and be able to, as we design our architectures, be able to adjust to policy changes, and like others here, certainly we ensure that we meet the standards of HIPAA and GDPR, and depending on the regions we're in, each region has different rules. So, but I'd also like to point out this kind of goes back even to like Bluetooth. There's also other ways to manage privacy beyond what's just in the rule. And I think that's some of the excitement around edge computing and how data can stay at the edge and all the data doesn't need to be shared. And we're able to offer, through our virtual care patch, that a person can opt in to sharing that data, or they can see the results themselves and share it voice, or share it however they want to share it. Whereas in medtech in the past, that just hasn't become available. It's always been a one-way flow of information to a doctor, and then the patient hears from the doctor about what is going on. So how that ties into Bluetooth as well is, on the wearable side, a big weakness has been on having to recharge, going through batteries, and so on. So it's always been a big burden on devices worn on the body that once you take it off, it's hard to get a person or a patient to put it back on. So people drop out of trials, or they drop out of care compliance because of that. But when you're able to process all the data and run AI models on the device, like companies like RR are able to do, then you use Bluetooth what you really need to use it for, and just sending the critical results off that device instead of spending all that power on sending millisecond by millisecond data. So I think that's just an example of, again, kind of this flow of innovation and funding in these areas even applies into privacy.
Yeah, I just to piggyback on that a little bit, Scott, and yes, there's the whole aspect of how you use technology to make it easier for the user and more feasible for the user to use it on a regular basis. The other thing is access to it as well. What we've seen over the last several months is the use more of personal technology versus medical technology, just to even get to the point of diagnosis and in the telehealth side of it. Because people weren't going into the hospitals or weren't going into the clinics. There were physicians that were having to rely more on personal devices, smartwatches, heart rate monitors, other things that are sort of over the counter and maybe geared more towards health and fitness, but they've all gotten to the point of pretty precise data that can help in the diagnosis and treatment options for an individual. So we've actually seen this sort of wavering of the regulations around, can a non-quote medical grade device be utilized as part of the diagnosis and treatment of an individual? And so we've seen some relaxing of the rules there as well. Now, how far those will continue over time will be seen, but it was a necessity. People just weren't going in, and so if you can't go in to get your diagnosis, you got to find the data from somewhere in order to give the physicians a leg up. And it was the integration of technology and the use of these personal devices that was really trying to help support that, over the last 18 months or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly here at Parks, we've seen this pretty big uptick in ownership of connected health products. I believe the data point we shared earlier was something like 55% of U.S. broadband households owning at least one connected health product, internet connected health product.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate. I mean, the data that we have is probably more associated with the number of, how many of these devices ultimately ship, which is in the hundreds of millions per year. Moving to almost a 500 million devices, wearable type devices for health, fitness, and medical. Whether or not it's even in hearables as well, but you have a significant number of these devices that are making their way into the market, and people are just looking for ways to utilize the data and utilize the information that's on it, and it's getting trusted more and more as people get more and more comfortable with the devices that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. So it looks like we have about 10 minutes or so left for questions from the audience. We do have a few questions in already, so very happy to see. So the first one is asking if any of you have comments on the health at home model. So for example, there has been this partnership between the Mayo Clinic and the Mayo Clinic president was commenting on a partnership with Kaiser and Medically Home, talking about creating the next generation of patient-centric care.
Well, so there's no question that as healthcare evolves into more and more of the both preventive, but also an environment where patients are more open to actually deal with the services, because no one wants, most people don't seem to want to go to the hospital. They don't want to go to the clinic. Mm-hmm. And so more and more you can have the care at home. Actually, the more involved the patients are actually going to become in their healthcare. One, because it's an environment they're comfortable in, that we've certainly seen that. And two, they actually get more actively involved because they actually start getting more understanding of how they're doing. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling process in terms of helping the prevention and reducing costs, obviously, on the facility side. But in terms, as I said, ultimately it gets more in terms of patients. People get more engaged in their healthcare and earlier on.
Yeah, I think there's actually there's such a significant emphasis as of late around long-term care, and the long-term care initiatives really are about not necessarily having someone be in a quote home or in a facility, but to be at home. And when you're at home, then you have to set up what you really want to set up is a long-term care scenario that has in-home healthcare as its primary focus. And being able to get real-time information, sent to physicians who are monitoring the general health of an individual, and then finding opportunities where maybe diagnosis is required or medical treatment is required, and then it's the person coming in when necessary, not just because they feel something, but because there's actually something that's been diagnosed as a part of that in-home healthcare system that they have access to. And I think that's just the basic trend that we're getting to is that in-home healthcare is more comfortable, it's better for the patient, it's better for the individual, but you still have to have the data that's necessary, and that's where these devices are really going to play a significant role, not only now but well into the future.
It's an interesting situation.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you've got an interesting problem here where a lot of what we're doing in connected health, as you mentioned, was addressing a shortage of service providers and trying to scale this. But healthcare is possibly the most personal service we purchase. And you had in this conference yesterday, there was a speaker, Renee Dua, yesterday, who her last company was a company called Heal that she created that's home healthcare, and now she's really tough to scale. They're doing a nice job, but now she's working on something to help people just get easy advice on a very personal basis, where everyone wants, to some extent, wants their information private, but they really want our services to come to them on a very personal basis and focus very much on them. And in the home is great, but it's really tough to scale.
I totally agree with you, and that's exactly what I was going to say, that it's very tough to scale, and that's where AI and ML come into play. And because when you are dealing with this large mass population hospital at home, you got to be able to do it in an automated fashion, because you don't have enough physicians or providers to provide this very personal experience. So that's where the challenge is going to be, and we are working on that aspect as well. And we know that with current model, it is very difficult to scale in this vertical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there certainly is these different levels of automation from that cloud layer of communication, video, the personal element that's mentioned, and then down to where we were talking about the device level. And I think, I can speak to the device layer, I guess, that like we've seen with autonomous vehicles, just the technology explosion as that market took off. And now that we can use that technology into medtech type devices. And I believe it was a quote coming out of Harvard from a professor stating that, over 50% of care, of primary care, could be done in the home if the right tools were there. And I think we've been limited so far in the technology as far as what devices. Certainly there's great devices. TytoCare is one. BioIntelliSense is another up-and-comer company. But I think the next generation will involve doing a lot more processing in the home and being able to, so that we can really kind of get to that dream tricorder for this home health. And then it's just the results need to be communicated to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and certainly I remember a lot of interesting devices trying to hit the market that were that tricorder design, and just having a difficult time with the business models and being able to successfully execute. The potential was there, it was just not the right time, unfortunately. But it is the right time now, I think. So there's certainly, we can expect to see, I think, some interesting things. So we do have another question in from the audience asking what the number one thing that investors want to see is from early stage startups, maybe seeking pre-seed or seed stage funding, and also the number one turnoff. So I think this question would be a good fit for Greg, and also maybe you as well, Scott.
As far as seed and pre-seed, what we're looking for is a great team. It's you're really betting on the team, and in a number of cases, what you're working on at that time is probably not what you're going to end up delivering. The market will inform you they would like something different, and you need to be flexible to get there. My biggest turnoff is when people say, well, this is a $10 billion market, and if I just get 1% of it, I'm a $100 million a year company, with no reason behind why you would get 1% other than it's just kind of a small number. Reasons why you would get that, and why your team and your service is capable of taking that percent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess just, my view, certainly the team, has to be there, like Greg was saying, that's really who you're betting on. I think the bonus points come into how you can protect yourself around IP and protect your competitive advantage of what gets you in the door on getting those first customers. Is usually that type of is based on your differentiation, right? Otherwise, they go with a bigger player that's more established. So, yeah, I guess that's what I would add to what Greg was saying.
All right. Yes, right, very good. I think that's unfortunately about all that we have time for today. But I'd like to thank you all so very much for joining us and doing this great panel discussion. Just definitely learned a lot. And hopefully everyone can join us in the networking chat room. The link should be included in the chat box to the right of your screen. If you don't have the chat box open, you might have to click the button on the right. But yes, it was very, very happy to have everyone here, and hopefully you can join us in the chat room as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes, and as a reminder to everyone, Parks Associates does have some upcoming research on the connected health market. Our virtual care study gives us a unique view with some trending data on these major shifts that have been happening, looking at consumer familiarity, use, and demand for telehealth services, as well as connected health devices. It evaluates user experience with telehealth services and investigates consumer appetite for virtual care as a standard offering outside of crisis conditions. We also have a second study publishing that focuses specifically on health and wellness solutions to help seniors, as well as their family caregivers, to live in their home independently, safely, and well. It quantifies the effect of the COVID-19 crisis on seniors and family caregivers, assessing concerns, pain points, and demand for different types of technology products and services. As a special thank you for attending, we are offering all Connected Health Summit attendees a $500 credit if you would like to purchase these studies in September. If you have any questions or research needs, please make sure to reach out to our VP of Business Development, Jason Ferris. We also offer some sponsorship opportunities for our Connected Health Summit and other events. Again, a special thank you to our sponsors, Alarm.com, Everrise, and Essence for helping to make this event possible. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you back for our December 1st event looking at interoperability.